On this final day of the 2025 NPF Rare Diseases Reporting Fellowship, we'll begin at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the rare disease realm. Our speakers will help us understand the incredible opportunities to advance diagnostics and drug development for rare disorders. We'll also learn how AI can provide vital information that supports improved caregiving for people living with rare disease. First, we're joined by Vanessa Almendro-Navarro. Vanessa is Vice President and Head of Science and Technology Innovation at Danaher Corporation. Her work focuses on AI-enabled research and development, and she leads enterprise innovation and modernization across a global portfolio. Vanessa's colleague, Mary Carmichael, also joins us. Mary is the head of Science and Technology Communications at Danaher. She helps translate complex innovation in life sciences, diagnostics, biomanufacturing, and AI into clear, compelling stories. Mary is also a former science journalist for Newsweek and the Boston Globe. And Vik Sharma rounds out our panel. Vik is the founder of MiraKare, a health tech startup that empowers families caring for loved ones with complex medical needs through the use of AI-powered diagnostic tools. That technology gives caregivers clarity, confidence, and connection through data-driven insights that help them move from reacting to anticipating care needs. You can read their full bios on our website at nationalpress.org. Vanessa, Mary, and Vik, thank you so much for joining us today. I will start with Vanessa and Mary. They will lead us through insights about AI and research and development, and then we'll go to Vik. Take it away.
Sounds terrific. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for inviting us today, and we are honored to be here with this beautiful audience. So let me see if I can share my slides. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Can you go full screen?
I am full screen. Can you see that now?
Yes, now.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. Again, we are very excited to be here and be able to share with you some of the work that we have been doing at Danaher Corporation related to the rare disorders, but also we are to share with you our own personal perspectives into what is important for us to pay attention as we try to advance the potential of genomic medicines for rare disorders. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to try to summarize the story of baby KJ, a story that I'm hoping at this point it's very familiar to most of you. And before I get specifically into the details of that case study, I want to take 1 second to reflect on 3 specific stories that have changed the course of science. In 2012, Emily Whitehead was the first child to be cured of relapsed ALL with a therapy that at that point was experimental, a CAR T-cell therapy. This experimental treatment was able to drive a full complete response on Emily, who is today considered cured. And this CAR T experimental cell therapy ended up becoming Kymriah, which is now an approved treatment that can be used to treat approximately 10,000 eligible patients in the US. In 2019, Victoria Gray was also a patient that was the first to receive an experimental treatment. In this case, this was an ex vivo CRISPR gene editing technology. And this CRISPR gene editing therapy ended up becoming caregiving, a treatment approved by Vertex Pharmaceuticals that today is able to be used to treat around 60,000 eligible patients in the US. And just a few months ago, baby KJ Muldon became the first patient to receive another experimental treatment. In this case, was an in vivo CRISPR-based editing therapy that was used to treat a metabolic disorder, in this case, a urea cycle disorder. All these 3 experimental treatments, Kymriah, Casgevy, and the treatment for baby KJ that is called CABE, have provided virtually long-lasting cures to devastating diseases. Yet, in contrast with Kymriah and Caregiving, the treatment for baby KJ moved on was specifically designed only for this baby, with no traditional commercial viable path to really take this personalized treatment and make a commercial therapy out of it. And it is really important that we focus on how can we enable the scalability and access to these personalized treatments. Why? Because importantly, our awareness of all these individual patients with single specific personalized mutations that might be eligible for gene editing technologies is only going to increase in the years to come. If we take a very quick historical perspective, the price of genetic sequencing has decreased around 100,000-fold over the past 20 years. And the access to genomic sequencing has enabled us to identify many more diseases that are caused by genetic alterations. So our awareness of all these genetic diseases is just continuing to increase. Yet when we look into the investment that has been made and the actual progress in pairing these genomic mutations with actually therapeutic interventions, innovation actually and drug development has led behind. We are not keeping pace in developing treatments for these potential genomic mutations that can be virtually providing some sort of treatments and opportunities for these patients. And while we know that genomic medicines are today advanced and providing, again, the examples of the long-lasting virtual cures that I mentioned before, we know that genomic medicines are still in their infancy. We are not yet capitalizing and maximizing the impact that these modalities could have in human health. And why is that? Well, when we look into the actual patient journey, there is still room for improvement and so much that we need to do in diagnosing the diseases and finding these patients. Still, when we always hear about rare disease patients going through this diagnostic odyssey, still there are many misdiagnoses and patients take years before they can be diagnosed by having the right diagnosis on their genomic alteration. Even when we find that there is something wrong with your DNA, we don't know always what that means. There is so much still that we need to uncover about the DNA. Only around 2 to 5% of the DNA has a known function. And even when we know what we need to do to treat this specific mutation, there is so much that needs to be improved when it comes into manufacturing these treatments, especially manufacturing personalized therapeutics for these specific mutations. And why is that? I want to here to reflect on an important topic that more and more and more is becoming the center of conversations within industry, within drug developers, and within our current administration. That is the fact that cell and gene therapies are extremely complex therapeutics compared to small molecules. And if we think about it, a small molecule might have few atoms. It's just like a very simple, from a molecular perspective, type of therapeutic. Cell and gene therapies are multi-component treatments. They might have a guide RNA, for example, to target this specific gene therapy to your target gene. There may be an enzyme that is going to be doing the right fix within the DNA to correct that specific mutation. And then there might be a delivery system that is going to make sure that this specific, for example, gene editing technology can reach the right cell and the right tissue. So there is so much that needs to be done in this space. And then again, when I mentioned, even when we are able to manufacture these treatments, one of the main focus today of research is that the delivery systems that we have are very limited. We know we can reach the liver. Most of the lipid nanoparticles, most of these delivery systems go to the liver. And still, there is so much research that needs to be done to make sure that these gene editing technologies, for example, can go to other tissues, including lung, heart, brain. And it's important that we recognize that in the industry, there are many players that are trying to work in solving the challenges and the problems that I just mentioned, from the diagnostics perspective to actually the administration and the monitoring of the patients. But we know that not a single player in the industry is going to be able to solve for this extremely complex problem. How do we identify, qualify, and treat a rare disease patient with the right treatment. This is something that needs to be done in collaboration. This is the reason why at Danaher Corporation, we have recognized that the only way that we are going to be advancing in editing space is by driving collaborations with key leaders. And a couple of years ago, we launched a collaboration with Jennifer Doudna, Fyodor Urnov, and the Innovative Genomics Institute, where we are trying to rewrite and rethink and redesign the way that gene editing technologies can be developed today for rare disorders. And I don't have too much time to go into the details of this specific collaboration, but just very briefly, why is this important? Just to reflect on the example I mentioned before. In particular, at IGI, Fyodor Urnov has been very interested for many years to find a path to develop treatments for inborn errors of immunity. There are more than 100,000 patients today in the US diagnosed, identified, living with inborn errors of metabolism. But unfortunately, this is not a single disease that has one single mutation that can be target to treat every single patient. There are many different mutations that are causing the same disease. And because the diversity of the mutations that need to be treated to actually be able to provide a therapy for this specific disorder, there are actually no drugs approved. So one of the thinking that we had when we were considering, we need to do something different and reconsider how do we develop these treatments is there a way that we can develop an umbrella approach where we can target many different mutations with one single unified approach? And this idea is what led to the concept of platform technology. Can we consider these diseases a platform? Again, very briefly, what is the idea of changing the paradigm to develop treatments for these patients is that instead of doing, as we have here in the slide in the left-hand side, one single individual treatment for every single patient that is going to be linear, costly, and extensively, very, very challenging to do, and costing, in this case, for example, the first patient that they treated was 4 years and $7 million. Is there any way that we can rethink the way that we develop personalized treatments in a way that is a circular process? It becomes a platform. We can learn from one patient and leverage these learnings to then build quickly and fast for the second and the third patient. So this concept of platform technology is a concept that you might be, you have probably seen out there, is a focus of the industry, is a focus today of our regulatory agency as well. And basically what we are trying to do to advance the field, and again, you can read much more if you are interested in, this has been published in the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. What we have been doing is trying to consider how do we build a playbook today where we can really build the right guideline to use a platform approach to develop personalized gene editing technologies. A guideline when we can know for every single new treatment that we are doing, what is a fixed component in the process I mentioned before, from identifying the target and the patient to actually, delivering the treatment, that is a fixed component that doesn't need to be evaluated over and over again in every single patient. And what is a variable component that we might need to reevaluate from a regulatory perspective. So this platform type of approach is something that today we believe is going to really change the way that we develop personalized treatments. And we hope to see the industry and academic investigators and hospitals adopting, and regulators for sure, adopting this concept of platform technology to enable the accelerated development and access to personalized treatments for patients with rare disorders. We published, again, a couple of papers if you are interested. And in the last 2 minutes, I just want to connect the dots of this platform approach that I just mentioned to baby KJ. Why? Because we believe that baby KJ has been the example into how this concept that was before was just a concept of platform technology can actually be operationalized. So in the next 2 minutes, let me connect the dots here. Kiran Mustunuru and Becca Arens-Niklas, that are the physicians and doctors that developed the treatment for baby KJ, they were working for many years trying to consider the same concept. Is urea cycle disorders, for example, are also diseases, very severe diseases in babies, also caused by many mutations. There are 8 different genes that mutations in these genes can cause this UCD. And what happens when you have a mutation in one of the genes is that these babies do not produce the right enzyme to process nitrogen. And when you cannot process nitrogen, basically what you have is an accumulation of ammonia in the blood. And this ammonia can cause many severe symptoms in these babies, including, neurological, challenges. And today the treatments, honestly, are very antiquated. They are not good. These patients might get just nitrogen scavengers, might have like diet, and when they are in severe cases, they might need actually a liver transplant. What happened with baby KJ is that unfortunately this baby was born with the most severe of all the mutations for urea cycle disorder, and it was so severe that we could not even wait for baby KJ to grow to the right way to be eligible for a liver transplant. So what happened was that between Kiran, IGI, and Danaher Corporation, and then few other participants, we had to figure out a way to quickly develop a treatment that could correct this specific mutation that was causing the disease in baby KJ. And that required the industry to rethink, how do we take a process that usually is going to take 1.5 years to actually just do this treatment in 6 months? So long story short, we published this effort in a New England Journal of Medicine paper. What we were able to do is to rethink the full development of a personalized gene editing technology to be able for the first time to develop a treatment in 6 months. And this was a monumental effort led by many players, as we have in this slide, that and with active and very dynamic participation of our regulatory agency. And we did it. We were able to develop a treatment. And in 6 months, baby KJ was able to receive the first dose of this specific gene editing technology and the second dose in month 8. And we know today baby KJ is thriving. And so far, this treatment is providing a long-lasting therapeutic benefit for this specific patient. But this is something that we cannot do consistently for any other patient. This is not a scalable model. We do need to develop the right new path to now be able to take this specific patient, what we've learned in the industry, and move forward and build a scalable platform. And this is where this concept I mentioned before of platform technology is really important, because we've done it once in the industry. Now we need to see what can we learn from this one baby and be able to scale for many more babies. And, fortunately for us, Becca and Kiran Musunuru at CHOP are driving now the path. They have now agreed with our regulatory agency to create a new umbrella approach, where they are going to be getting this platform approach and trying to develop many more personalized treatments for these patients. And with these individual learnings from every single patient, we are going to be able to infer a path to hopefully be able to cure or have like a therapeutic approach for one of these specific rare disorder mutations. And I want to close, and apologies, I know it took a little bit longer than I was supposed to, by also inspiring the audience today to think beyond the story that I just shared with you about baby KJ, because I just focus pretty much about how can we develop and manufacture a treatment very quickly through a platform approach to one specific patient, and from there really expand to many more patients. But the reality is that when we think about the rare disorders, the problem that we are trying to solve today is not just limited to the manufacturing component. As I mentioned before, this is an ecosystem problem. We have demonstrated the technical feasibility. What's not ready today are the systems. We need to find the right way to diagnose these patients through newborn sequencing, to be able to refer these patients to the right interventional genomic clinics, those hospitals that will have the right capabilities to develop these personalized treatments, where we can then have the quick, fast manufacturing through different type of systems, where we can actually get, sharing the data across multiple hospital systems and networks so that we can learn from individual cases into patient population, approaches. And importantly, where these treatments can be reimbursed at the hospital level. This is not the traditional biotech biopharma process. We are here reinventing a new paradigm to develop personalized gene editing technologies. And with this, I want now to hand it over into Mary Carmichael, who has been leading really the way to tell the scientific and technical story that I just shared with you and crystallize this into the right message so that we can continue to drive impact in the space. Mary?
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, and I am gonna share my screen. And while I'm doing that, I wish I could tell you guys that I'm gonna make that easier to process for you, because I know that was a lot. That's a very, very complicated field, and we're doing big, ambitious things. I'm gonna actually make it more difficult. Sorry, so I hope you have some brain space left, because that last slide that Vanessa showed, you probably will have noticed those challenges. I believe there were 8 of them on the side. None of those is going to happen without significant technological advances, not just in biomedicine, but also in AI. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the intersection of AI and rare diseases and how you can report on those things in a way that is ethical and deeply human and also simple enough that people can understand. Now, you'll have to forgive me. Can you guys see my slides at all? What are you seeing? You're seeing my slides?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, because I'm not. So this is a little strange for me. I apologize. Let me make sure that I can see my slides. Okay, terrific. I'm going to move to the next one. Can you see this? Can you see the New York Times article?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So what are we looking at here? Vanessa showed you three people who have benefited from remarkable new technology that we have for treating rare disorders. Her 3 people were Emily Whitehead, Victoria Gray, and of course, baby KJ. Those are all incredible examples of things that really just KJ, at least a year ago, I think would have been unthinkable. We're looking at another example here from the Times. This was from earlier this year as well. This is actually a relatively simple application of AI for rare disorders. It's repurposing a drug to treat something that it wasn't originally developed for. But we can do so much more than that now. And I think it sounds like you guys have heard about quite a lot of those advances in rare disorders over the last few days. A few examples of how AI can come in here. It can accelerate research by identifying patterns in data that humans might miss. It can match patients to potential diagnoses or to clinical trials more quickly. That's an example of something you also saw in Vanessa's last slide. It can simulate the way that disease works, the pathobiology, the mechanisms, the treatment responses, and that way it can help researchers prioritize the most promising therapies and move faster. And to Vanessa's point about KJ, time is a luxury that a lot of these patients simply do not have. As you know, many of them are children. We do not have time to sit and wait. We've got to move as fast as we can without compromising quality. But this is also a moment where new technologies in both biomedicine and AI are also profoundly frightening to many people. So the next story you see here, it's from the same publication. It's from the Times again. It's actually even by the same reporter. And it's about vaccines, but the same narrative here applies to so many biomedical technologies that have incredible potential for treating rare disorders. mRNA is one, gene editing is another. And the opponents of these technologies are, as the subhead says here, closer to power than they have been in the past. And lest you believe that the technology opponents are only on the side of MAGA for AI, they are everywhere. We may even have a few of them in this audience. So this photo was taken on the campus of the Innovative Genomics Institute, which, as Vanessa just explained, that's where a lot of the work takes place for our joint effort to develop these N of 1, but platform scalable gene editing therapies for ultra rare disorders. This is an effort that will benefit hugely from AI in a lot of ways. The person in this photo is actually Danaher's chief AI officer, and he was there for a scientific meeting to plan the next phase of that work, that scientific project. But you can see what he's standing next to. That's a flyer. It's posted right outside the Innovative Genomics Institute that says, "Stop AI." This is Berkeley. Pretty confident that a MAGA person did not post that flyer. And you wonder if the person who did post it was aware of what was going on inside the building, these potentially life-saving advances. More broadly, you kind of have to wonder if we as a collective society fully understand both the benefits and the risks of both these biomedical technologies and AI in the way that we need to in order to have a productive conversation. As a former journalist and now someone who gets to work with journalists all the time, I would argue that it is partly your responsibility to help drive that really thoughtful conversation. So that's what I want to spend a few minutes talking about, how you can ensure that in this critical moment for both biomedicine and AI, you're reporting responsibly, because I know that's what you want to do. I'm going to give 3 pieces of advice. Take it for what it's worth. I'm not a journalist anymore, but I still think like one. I would say that there are two don'ts and 1 do here. And the first don't is don't believe the hype. Now, if you're a journalist, hopefully you already know that, but let's talk about what it looks like in this context. It means listening to the technology skeptics. Now, I said skeptics, not opponents, not people who are so against these technologies that they won't even think about them critically. But skepticism, that's at the core of journalism. My literal job right now is to tell stories about the transformative power of biomedicine, our technologies, and AI. But look, even I am aware that there is a lot of hype out there. Rare disease families are especially vulnerable to that kind of hype. They are living through uncertainty, exhaustion, grief. A lot of these technologies, AI included, sound so powerful. They can give people unrealistic expectations. And that's a problem that you need to avoid contributing to. So some things to watch out for. Tech-first narratives. Stories where the technology is the hero instead of a tool. Overclaiming, promising cures or definitive answers based on not just early stage clinical trials. I know don't cover it if it's only in mice, but also early stage algorithms, because the technology for AI is also, it may seem frighteningly advanced, but in some ways it's still kind of embryonic. A useful question you might want to ask yourself as you're reporting, how close is this technology to something a patient will actually experience? And some information that you want to be sure that you're providing. Context, obviously. Where is this technology in the development life cycle? Is it research? Is it clinical validation? Is it regulatory review? Is it actually being deployed yet? In the case of AI, we're pretty far off from a lot of that. There is no drug on the market that has been designed by AI yet for rare disorders or for anything else. Timelines. Don't just talk about what's possible. Talk about when it might be possible and under what conditions it would be possible. What is necessary to make it a reality? And then limits. Every model has them. So spell those out clearly. I think remembering that in rare disease, a single sentence of hype can give a family months of false hope. So don't do that. A single well-reported story can prevent that. You can protect patients while also giving them realistic expectations, what hope actually should look like. Again, I realize that don't believe the hype is pretty much journalism 101, but the next thing I'm going to say may seem a little more counterintuitive. This is my second don't. Don't report the facts. So don't quote me only on that. What you should be thinking about is the trajectory of the facts. Get them right, but make it clear to your readers that in a field moving this fast, whether it is rare disorders research or it's AI or it's both, facts pretty much have a short half-life. Models change every quarter, regulatory guidance evolves, validation studies are updated constantly, and what's state-of-the-art right now may be obsolete 6 months from now. So yes, help your readers understand the science, but also help them understand that the science itself is a moving target. A little bit of practical advice. If you hear a claim, whether it's about a biomedical study or about AI, ask for the validation data, the evidence, the comparator studies, error rates. If it's AI, how was the model trained? How diverse was the data set? Critical to look at. What does real world performance look like? Push companies to explain what's still uncertain. What don't you know yet? Always a good question to ask. What failures have you seen? What failure modes have you seen? And be very precise with your language. I'll give you 3 terms that sound like synonyms: AI assisted, AI enabled, AI driven. These are not synonyms. So force your sources, whether they're companies, academic scientists, whoever you're talking to define the role that AI is actually playing in their research. For rare disease in particular, data scarcity makes AI very powerful, but also very risky. If you have a model that's trained on a tiny cohort, it may produce a really brilliant insight, and it may have a major blind spot. So a good thing to ask, how did you address the small numbers problem? Finally, you've probably heard the phrase, keep the human in the loop. That is advice for people who are thinking about AI or creating algorithms or tools. It's for developers, but it very much applies to journalists as well. So that's my do. Keep the human in the loop. And for a journalist, what that means is don't forget that a technology story is ultimately a people story. AI and rare disease is never just about algorithms. It's about families who are dealing with uncertainty. It's about clinicians who are trying to make better decisions. It's about scientists who are looking at the mess that is human biology and trying to make sense of it. And it's about regulators who are trying to balance innovation, which we desperately need, and safety, which is a must. That's not arguable. Now, AI doesn't replace human judgment in any of those cases. It changes the nature of it. And your coverage needs to reflect that. So some things to emphasize: who's making the decisions when a model suggests something unexpected? Whose data is being used? Who gave consent for that? Who is accountable if somebody gets something wrong? Who benefits, right? Cui bono, and who might be left behind. In rare disease, many of these communities are underserved, they're underrepresented, they may be invisible in traditional data sets. AI can narrow that gap, but it can also widen it. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. You can tell stories where AI accelerates a diagnosis. A family's experience shapes a model and therefore benefits other families. A clinician looks at an algorithm and says, I have some questions about that. A scientist uses AI to, again, find a pattern that no human can see. A regulator struggles with how to evaluate a system that is adaptive, that's learning. All of those are human journeys, and AI should be a tool, maybe a character, should never be the protagonist. Just in a quick summary, AI is going to reshape what we're seeing now with rare disease research and with care. The kind of things that Vanessa told you about, the way to scale those up is going to be to apply AI. But it's going to do so in ways that are uneven, surprising, sometimes quite messy. And as journalists, your job is not to be a cheerleader. It's not actually be a skeptic either. It's to be a clarifier, a person who helps families understand what's real, what's emerging, and what it means for them. And if you get that right, if you get the facts right, even if as they move, if you avoid the hype and you keep humans at the center, you are not just going to help rare disease communities navigate a transformative moment in biomedical history. You're going to be part of that transformation in a really exciting way. And I hope you're as excited about it as I am.
Mary, this is
I know your brains are already full and we got more to go. So I will pass it back, but look forward to speaking with any of you at any time about this in the future.
Thank you for that. I hope you'll be willing to be a mentor for some of these journalists as they develop stories. Now we're going to have the practical application. We're going to hear from Vik Sharma, and he'll tell us about MiraKare.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can you see my desktop?
Yes, we can. Can you go
Okay, perfect. Wow. Mary and Vanessa, thank you for sharing your insights, right? I think it's a reminder of like when we come together, what we can achieve. That's one. And really the importance of staying grounded and challenging the status quo often. Hi, everyone. My name is Vik Sharma. Thank you so much for making the time to hear our story. It's about a little girl who really inspired a platform that's designed to transform the management of complex care and turning that chaos into clarity. So the story starts with my daughter, Mira. Mira has cerebral palsy, which is a motor disorder. Mira is nonverbal, she's non-ambulatory, and she is dependent on the loving care provided by her extended caregiving village. Because of her disability, she's not able to communicate her most basic needs. So you can imagine as a father, as a caregiver, how painful sometimes it is to not understand. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional about this. Really to understand, her unspoken needs, right? Is she not feeling well? Is she in pain? Is she stressed out? And this helplessness is very hard. You can imagine being a parent and not understanding it. And we often make guesses on her care. And as a father, I wanted to do something about that. So, one of the problems that Mira has had in the past is that she doesn't sleep well. And so the genesis of MiraKare, the platform we built now, was that I said, when she has spaghetti with tomato sauce, through some trial and tribulation, we found out that she wakes up at night. And it bothered me that it took us years to figure out why it took us so long. So I said, well, we could collect sleep data through wearables like a Fitbit or Oura Ring, and we could construct a sleep night. And as caregivers, we could also then track what her meals were. And what took us years to figure out should take us, weeks to months if she has this meal a few times, because we basically overlay good sleep, bad sleep with the meals, and we would see a little clustering that would happen. So really, that was the inspiration behind what we built. And really, as a father, as a caregiver, my goal is to give a voice to those who cannot communicate, give them that wellness voice. So really, that was a genesis of MiraKare. Yeah. So I'm going to be sharing a couple of statistics in coming up in this presentation. These come from the US, but I know the audience is global. But I will let you know that whether you're in Europe, in Asia, Latin, Africa, families caring for someone with complex medical needs describe the same struggles. So here are some facts about managing complex care in the US. So you don't have to go too far to find a caregiver, because 1 in 4 amongst us is a caregiver. And in the US, like in many other places, there's this need to cut costs, save money. So in the US, almost $300 billion worth of this care is shifting to the home. The challenge there is that 55% of caregivers are providing medical care. However, only 11% of them are trained to do so. So families basically are being asked to do more and more with less and less. And what this leads to, when you think about it, is, overload, burnout, chaos, right? Families are absorbing this shift and are not being given the tools or the training. So this problem is very real. I live it 24/7. So if you were to ask the 11 million Americans who are managing this complex care, and when I talk about complex care, I'm talking about individuals with rare diseases, individuals, autism, dementia, cerebral palsy, like my daughter has, right? You were asked them, we are overwhelmed, we are burnt out, and every day for many of us feels like drowning. And when you start looking back at the complexity of the care that's given, us caregivers, right, we just lack basic tools that we need to manage care effectively. And I use the term, we're often flying blind, we're often guessing, right? And when you start looking at clinicians who can really value the information things that are happening at home, because majority of the care happens at home, right? They don't have really that clear visibility at all. So, information that could really make a meaningful difference in providing the right care often doesn't come across when you go for those hospital visits. And for researchers, especially those studying rare diseases, there's almost no access to this real world data. So much of the lived experiences remains invisible, undocumented, and underutilized in science. So I'd like to kind of give you a little sense, right, of what it's like to manage care. So if you look at this visual here, I'll give you a second or two just to kind of process it, right? It is managing care, even in the best of circumstances, is chaotic. So the way we manage care, most of us, is shared calendars, folders, use multiple apps, use emails, phones, texting, paper, and a lot of the information is kept in our head, right? And really, it's not easy to share. And if you think about it, managing complex care is not, I call it, a solo sport. You can have anywhere from 1 to 5 caregivers who are managing that care. And if you just look at the amount of communication, coordination that's required, And if you're using these fragmented, antiquated tools, you can imagine how often things can get missed. So and none of these tools, right? If you look at them, were never designed for caregivers, but we've been forced to use them in the lack of not having anything that's better. So I'll continue with the journey a little bit more. So what happens when you can't find the information at the point of need? I'll tell you, when you are stressed, frustrated, sorry, let me reframe, right? So what happens when you can't find this information, right? That's absolute frustration, stress, lost time. And really the most important thing is that care definitely gets impacted. And I can give you an example of that, right? That when you are thrust in an emergency situation where Mira ended up in the ER a couple of years ago, the doctor's asking questions at that point. They need information. And my recall was not there. So really some critical information that would have been valuable at that time, I just couldn't remember it. Right. So that's the thing, right? One missing note can mean a missed medication change. And one undocumented pattern means a preventable ER. So how do we turn this, I call it this chaos into clarity? So MiraKare, the way I describe it is a AI power-driven platform that is designed by caregivers for caregivers. Essentially, what we have done is that we connect data to wearables, commercially available wearables like Fitbit, Oura Ring, Apple Watch, where we record and capture health vitals such as sleep. And caregivers, in a very streamlined manner, knowing how overwhelmed they are already, are able to track observation activities and log them. And essentially, we take this data, we converge it and synthesize and provide families summaries, patterns, and trends that are just not possible today if we just do it manually. So our goal, what we're trying to do is give families that proactive care, support, so we can turn that chaos into clarity and not having to be always being reactive, scrambling, finding that information. And I would say for clinicians, we're providing that visibility that they just don't have of what's happening at the home, where, as I said, a majority of the care is delivered. And really, when I think about rare diseases, the lack of that real world evidence, where you can have a population of N equals 1 to a few hundred to a few thousand at most, and where you have a population that's dispersed globally, how do you collect this real world evidence? So we've built a platform that allows us to do that. And for researchers, it really unlocks the real world data they never had before. So in closing, I just want to say that MiraKare is just more than a platform. I call it a movement to reimagine caregiving and transform the lives of millions of people. And to journalists who are here today, I want to thank you for your time, your work, and commitment to uncovering these stories that matter. You are the ones who are amplifying the stories of families who are struggling. You're the ones who are bringing rare disease reality to public awareness. And your reporting truly helps shape policies, funding, and innovation that follows. So thank you for your time and listening.
I have to take this opportunity to publicly thank Vik for joining me during lunch at the Nord Summit. I was bent over my laptop, and Vik's smile and his energy just drew me into his story. And it's a good example of how you as journalists should take opportunities to go to scientific conferences, or if it's possible, if there are any in your area, you'll meet people like Vik, who have a very passionate and profound reason for producing these tools. I noticed in the chat that Mary has very graciously agreed to respond to some questions that some of the journalists have dropped in. So I'm hoping that we can save a bit of time in that regard. But I have a question for each of you. And I think during our prep calls, I sort of expressed the need for ensuring that the information has value across a range. So the journalists from New York and the journalists from Eswatini each get something out of these conversations. So I'd like to start with you, Vanessa. What advice or encouragement would you give to a journalist who may be in a country where there is no, MIT or teaching university nearby, or where there are no biotech engineers readily available? What would you say in terms of their ability to try to communicate these very complicated issues?
That's a great question. So I think that maybe a way to communicate, at least the way I always like to do it, is through case studies, right? So having a story where you can anchor what's the message that you want to deliver, and use that. And as well importantly, I mean, when you just mentioned, you are distant, there are no academic centers, there might be no institutions. Something that it's important is we are global. This is a global problem. So trying to establish those partnerships with others that can help you to validate your facts, your data, that can help you maybe to position the messaging in a way that might resonate better to the audience that you are going out, especially if it's a different type of setting or country where you might want to express the same message differently, right? I think that's going to be important. I can reflect, it's not the same, but I can reflect, for example, I was giving this same talk in Spain, 3 weeks ago. And one of the challenges is always what's the jump off point, what it is that your audience knows, so that you can build your story on top of that, right? So I think that as well, when you are trying to have the same message in different areas or, countries, geographies, it's important as well to dial up or dial down the story to make sure that we can get the basics of information. What's that jump off point? I think that's important.
Mary, we're often told as journalists that we have to be experts on a new topic every day. And so what advice would you give? One of the questions in the chat was, what level of expertise do you feel journalists need to have when talking about this? So what advice would you give those journalists?
So I think that I remember from being a journalist feeling that pressure. And in some ways, I think that pressure can feel even more intense now, because you cannot be an expert on all of these things. Honestly, sometimes I wonder, except for Vanessa, of course, how expert the experts can even be, because everything is moving so fast, right? Like that is actually true of everybody, that you wake up and you've got to learn something new every day, because everything is changing so quickly. I would argue that in some ways the journalist's role at this point is not to try to be an expert in any of these fields, certainly not all of them, but to be an expert in asking the right questions, right? And I would say the actual experts need to be asking themselves the right questions too. But if they're not, the journalist's responsibility is to do that. The level of expertise that needs to come out in the coverage, you want to make sure you're not getting anything wrong, right? Like, it's still important that there not be inaccuracies in describing the technology, but I think putting it in context is even more important. And that's not about expertise. That's about empathy. That is about fairness. That's what unfortunately sometimes get called the soft skills. I think that's where the real expertise is most needed at this point.
Vik, what advice would you give to a journalist who may be from a country with very little internet access, and having one of these diagnostic tools might be almost impossible? What would you say?
It's an incredibly challenging thing to do. I think honestly, that's a societal responsibility, is to get these technologies to be much more accessible. We are absolutely trying to do that, and I know there are a number of others as well. I'm not sure if you saw the MacArthur Foundation grant this week. Did you see that?
I did.
This is $100 million for getting advanced diagnostic technologies where they need to be globally. because health problems are global. They just are, and they're more so now than they ever were. I think honestly covering things like that is really important. That I know the person who or actually both the people who won that grant, and I think there's something interesting here. You'll notice that the grant went to a Harvard scientist, but it also went to a leader on the ground in Africa who is working across the continent to get those technologies more available. Looking for stories like that and kind of following them along is going to be critical. For the journalists themselves, I actually do think it goes back to the non-technology piece, building your social network, making sure you're talking to the right people. And those
Mary,
those
I'm going
are
to jump in here and
experiences, right? And I think this fellowship is probably an example of that, right?
right. I'm going to let Vik jump in and answer that
Yes.
question. Well,
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think I would just echo what you said as well. And I think what it comes down to is, like, to me, when we look at the world, right, how unfair it can be, to me, the access to Wi-Fi, the internet is like water, oxygen today. You just need it. I think when it comes to this type of technology, I think it comes start. I would suggest to the journalists that, look, in the end, we're all human. I think understanding and getting the stories out, speaking to the families, talking to them, understanding their needs, their pains, their problems, and the support they need. I think the more we can amplify that, more we can talk about that, it's important. And I think when it comes to managing care, it is so hard, as I described, that often it becomes like, wow, when I speak with our caregivers, we all acknowledge, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's so hard. And oh, how's the weather? We just don't like to talk about it, right? And I think the importance of putting a human face to that care is so critical, is so important. So I would encourage all the journalists to go out there and to get those wonderful stories, get them out there. So there's raising that awareness, because that awareness leads to action, right? Action leads to outcomes. Outcomes lead to better living. So that would be my advice to the journalists.
again, there's so many great questions that I wish we could keep you all here for the next hour, but I think I'll wind this down by asking Simon Spisak to ask the question that I think is at the core of this as well, about feeding into the hype cycle. Go ahead and ask that question, Simon.
So thanks for the talk, everyone. I'm a journalist in Toronto. I've covered some issues with AI in the past. My concern is, by default, assuming that these technologies will be transformational, that we're feeding into the hype. We've been trying to do drug discovery for AI longer than the current hype cycle, and we only have a few candidates in trials. Many medical large language models hallucinate or inappropriately use race-normed algorithms. So are there practical examples where it's actually been transformational with the new AI, rather than saying it might be transformational in X or Y years because of this trajectory?
Simon, I think you had addressed this one to me in the chat earlier. I'm happy to take a first crack at it, although I think the others should absolutely weigh in here. So your question hinges on transformational for what, right? Drug discovery? I mean, that takes like 15 years not using AI, so we shouldn't expect it to happen in 15 minutes using AI. It's still going to take a long time. AI is not magic, right? It is empowering. It is helpful. It can accelerate things, but there are still humans involved. And we can't expect it to do things overnight. That said, yeah, there are actually some really interesting examples that I think we'll see much shorter timelines. Maybe it's 5 years or 3 years instead of 15, which is still a massive improvement. That said, there are a lot of things other than the entire drug discovery process that are actively being transformed right now. I'll give one example from some work that we have not yet published, but it is being done at Danaher. If you let's take a molecule of choice. Let's say mRNA, and we're doing this across many different molecular types. But let's just take mRNA as an example. One thing that you might want to do if you were developing an mRNA-based therapy or vaccine is make sure that the molecule is stable. And not just stable in the body, which, you know, you can see obvious advantages and disadvantages of that, right? mRNA, you need it to be there long enough to have an effect, but you don't want it to stick around so long that it becomes too powerful, too immunogenic, and causes problems. But it also needs to be stable outside the human body for reasons that I'm sure you're all familiar with. You need to be able to get it to many parts of the world who need it. And if the molecule degrades before it can make its way from the manufacturing facility to the country where it's needed, then it's not really helping as many people as it could. So you can use AI to design new forms of that molecule to tweak the structure so that it is more stable, or maybe it causes the body to express more of what it needs to express. There are a lot of things you can do. That is work that is happening now. And has been happening over the last couple of years, and that's what you saw some of the Nobels being given for, is models that can do that kind of thing. Yeah. Vanessa, did you want to chime in here, because I'm sure you have a lot more thoughts about like what's happening right now on the front lines. You're the scientist.
Thank you. I agree, Simon. You see, for me as a scientist, I think that the challenge is just in the statement that you mentioned, right? We don't have drugs that have been developed with AI. And to Mary's definition, I don't even expect that to happen. We are not going to have AI designing drugs. What AI is doing, what these models are helping us, is to accelerate and increase the probability of success in every single step of the process, so that instead of having to use a 15 years time frame to develop a treatment, maybe we are going to be able to shorten into 10 years. So there are today AI models that are helping us to be faster in identifying candidates, but still, you know, these candidates that you can do in silico, they need to be tested experimentally. There is AI helping us to be much more efficient in recruitment for clinical trials. There is AI that is helping us to quickly and faster identify, you know, genomic traits that might make you less eligible for a particular treatment. So AI is already being used and already providing benefits. But we need to bring that to reality, to the point that Mary was saying. AI is accelerating what specifically? It's not going to be AI is helping us to define or develop drugs. I do not like that statement when I say it over and over everywhere. It's how AI is helping us to increase every single step along the journey. And I think that distinction is important.
Yeah,
Vik, I want to give you the last word.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So, guys, I'm going to build on what Vanessa said in the beginning, right? Making the impossible possible. So, how do we practically use AI to make sense of this, all this data world we have, right? So, at MiraKare, look what we have, this hard data, right? Vitals, sleep, then these observation activities. We merge the two together. And really, for families who are struggling and trying to make sense of this all, we're allowing them to ask questions like, hey, listen, we made a change in medication. How did it impact sleep? How did it impact behaviors? Right? The ability to have this sort of questions. Most of us are not data scientists or statisticians, right? So the ability to kind of bring this data together and start to kind of organize it in a way that allows families to understand those unspoken needs, right, is really what I think AI's strength is. The ability for them to, instead of having to type something in natural language, just say, hey, listen, and capture those observation activities, converting speech to text and then classifying it. So to me, the practical use is that bringing this massive data together and really providing something that's meaningful, insightful, and actionable. So it's like really turning data into insights, insight into actions that drive outcomes that drive that better results. So I think in a nutshell, that's what AI brings to us. There's a lot of hype out there, but there's a lot of promise. And if we use it smartly, we can do incredible work.
Well, this has been an extraordinary briefing on this topic, and I am so grateful to Vanessa Almendro-Navarro, Mary Carmichael of Danaher, and Vik Sharma of MiraKare for helping journalists really get a strong grasp on what they need to report about this topic. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.
I'll be in touch with each of you, but I'm so grateful.